Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, dear students and colleagues. I would like to welcome you to today's edition of the event series WO Matters, WO Talks. The title today is Destroying Nature to Save It. I guess it's a bit provocative, but I expect the title is the program. My name is Margarete Rammersdorfer and I'm the Vice Rector for Academic Programs and Student Affairs here at the Vienna University of Business and Economics. The WO Matters, WO Talks event series has now been running for many years with a lot of interesting panel discussions and lectures. The aim of these events is to make socially and economically relevant topics accessible to the public. We all know that the challenges of our society today cannot be addressed without the consideration of the complex interaction of social, economic, and ecological crises and elements. The transformation of economic systems is broadly accepted to be necessary. Especially the climate crisis requires moving away from fossil fuels. The biodiversity crisis requires limits on and changes in land use, and scientists have shown the dangers of exceeding planetary boundaries. However, the question remains how and whether the current policies and future initiatives are or do enough to protect the people and our planet. This WO Talks event will critically address the policies currently being advocated in Europe and raises several questions. Our guests will discuss whether we need a completely new economic paradigm to inform systemic transformation. They will address what alternatives are required to initiate transformative change and lead to a better life for all. We will hear today evening from experts on ecological economics, biodiversity policy, food security, and environmental activism. So welcome to these inspiring discussions, and with this I would like to hand over to the moderator of this evening. Very warm welcome.
Good evening, and also a very, very warm welcome to all of you from my side. It's really great to see that so many of you are interested in this, indeed, maybe a bit provocative topic. At least the title is Destroying Nature to Save It. And I am your moderator tonight. As Margarete Rammersdorfer already said, my name is Ines Ohmann. I have some connection to the WU, having worked here for a while, some time ago. And Sigrid Stagel, who is the scientist of the last year, was one of my PhD supervisors, so it's always nice to come back, and especially with Clive this evening, with whom I also have some connections for years in the scene of ecological economics. Yeah, but not so much about me, it's about all of you. I'm really hoping we'll have an inspiring evening tonight. I'm pretty sure we'll have. And I have this thing in here which can click. What are we going to do? We will have a little check-in. I'll ask you some questions, and I hope you answer them via Mentimeter to get a bit of an idea of your associations with green transition. Then we'll hear Clive Spash, Professor Clive Spash, with his keynote, followed by an audience discussion. I call it audience because we have a panel with 4 excellent guests here who will start the discussion, but I'd like to quite quickly open it up to you that we can get as many questions as possible within the 1.5 hours we have for this talk. And then at about 7:30, maybe some minutes more, we'll have a reception outside with some drinks where you, of course, are all invited. And all our guests will stay for afterwards, and if you cannot pose your question during the discussion, I invite you to approach them, and I'm pretty sure you are open to talk with all of you tonight. All right, so now may I ask you to take your mobile phones or laptops and scan either the QR code or open menti.com and put in the code if the QR code is not working. There will be 2 questions, and I'd like you, if possible, to answer rather spontaneously, a bit from your gut feeling. It's not about any knowledge, it's really to get your thoughts, maybe even your emotions. The first question would be, what do you associate with green transition?
We don't get that.
Just 1 second, Lucas, our nice IT colleague, is opening it, I hope.
We get
Another one? Which one do you have? This is the second question. Okay. Okay, cool. Thank you. Thank you, Lucas. Maybe I sent you the wrong order and it was my mistake. Cool. I think I can go on and we'll see. No, this was too quick. Now? Because Lucas has to freeze and jump between two presentations. Okay. No, this is also the wrong. I see it here, but I don't see it here, Lucas. Ah, now, cool. This is this word cloud, green transition. Okay, in the center is something called greenwashing. It's interesting. This will be for sure a topic tonight. But we also have degrowth, system change, billionaires, sufficiency, I mean many words, decolonization, less fuels, circular economy, planetary boundaries, democracy, and I also see technology quite big here, and also justice. Wow, it's really cool, so many answers. Transformation, so I would say it's on a one side changes, transformation, then we have energy and technology, we have greenwashing, and we have green growth, capitalism, awareness, revolution, so really from small changes to really radical ones, everything, I would say, but also challenges that are behind, like extraction, what I see as a challenge, Bobo, green extractivism, but also questions about justice and democracy. A lot to cover for tonight, but I think many of these words will be part of your inputs, I'm pretty sure. Thanks. And the second question is the one you already saw in the beginning. This is now, for a green transition to happen, imagine you want it, and it's a good one. What needs to be done? What is needed for this transition to be successful? Okay, here I see rather strong answers, from degrowth to radical change to full transformation to system change to substantial pressure from below, attention and commitment from people, reconnection to the web of life. Here's something with positive emotions. Money, still needed. Can you scroll a bit up, Lucas, please, that I see what is... Yeah. A planetary institution. World communism. Yeah. Policies that are strictly enforced, trust, collaboration, more trees, a cultural shift, sufficiency, reduction of consumption, revolution, money, political leadership, limiting the power of capital. These answers are all quite strong, I would say. Not nitty-gritty small changes somewhere here or there, but strong systemic changes, structural changes from bottom up, from the people, but more even from top down, as I can see, strong structural changes as well. Hope, I do like social cohesion, collaboration, we also saw. Thank you so much. Please, Lucas, do not delete this. I'd like to keep them, and maybe, Clive, you want to take this also home with you. And I'd like now to ask you in a second to come to the floor. Clive Spash, Professor Clive Spash, will maybe answer these questions in his way now. Clive is an economist who writes researches and teaches on public policy with an emphasis on economic and environmental interactions. He has been working more than 30 years in different countries, even continents, in interdisciplinary research on human behavior, environmental values, and the transformation of the world political economy to be more just socially and environmentally. As many of you might know, he is strongly criticizing existing mainstream economics and also existing political systems, I would say, within the mainstream economic system. And he pursues with his work, through the evolving agenda of a politically aware and emancipatory social-ecological economics. This is, I would say, the disciplinary field or interdisciplinary field you are in, and which is very close to your heart. This is a very special WU Matters evening and event. Clive is going to leave in about a year, Austria, and this university, and so this is also his last public event on the WU. This is what he asked me to tell you. And yeah, Clive, now the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Do I get to sit on the screen here, Lucas, or not? Just on here? Okay, fine. All right, so I'm going to try and get through quite a lot as usual, and I do these talks. I will try and get through quite a few ideas in about 15 to 20 minutes. Okay, so destroying nature to save it. What I want to do is to run through how the economic mainstream is actually addressing the social-ecological crisis, how financialization of nature is actually being implemented and is concerned with how to make profits actually out of the crisis, the geopolitics of the energy transition. So as we saw in some of the clouds there, the concern about renewable energy and what that is entailing. And then I'll put up some alternative ideas about alternative agendas and alternative strategies. Okay, so the economic mainstream and the social ecological crisis. So what we have is a push for thinking about how we can compete with other nations and push green growth, and actually there's a race for leadership. So going back to even 2010, what we have is the CEO of Deutsche Bank saying, make no mistake, a new world order is emerging. The race for leadership has already begun. For the winners, the rewards are clear. Innovation and investment in clean energy technology will stimulate green jobs. It will create green growth. It will create jobs. It will bring greater energy independence and national security. So this is an agenda which is still current, right? It's very current. So just at the end of last year, we have the report, The Future of European Competitiveness, and you see here pushing exactly the same agenda. Reigniting sustainable growth. They haven't realized that sustainable growth is an oxymoron, but there you go. So what we have is reigniting sustainable growth is the key European policy, and it means closing the innovation gap. Competition with China and the United States is core aspect here, and seeing global decarbonation as a growth opportunity. So this is the climate crisis is a growth opportunity. So increasing security, of course, as well, because of the dependencies that we have in terms of materials I'll discuss later. So digitalization, decarbonization of the economy, and increasing our defense capacity. This is the core of the European vision right now. And this is, as I say, nothing new. Protecting economic growth and increasing financial returns has been on the agenda for quite some time. If we go back to 2010 or even earlier, there was the Stern Report. After the Stern Report, you had the Better Growth, Better Climate Report. This Better Growth, Better Climate Report comes from a political and economic elite, pushing forwards ideas which are concerned about how you can maintain growth when there's a climate crisis. What's the concern amongst this political and economic elite? Their concern is that in the long term, if climate change is not tackled, growth itself will be at risk. That's the disaster we're facing. Growth will be at risk. Okay, and of course, when it comes to biodiversity, similarly, another elite of economists pushing forward ideas that we can mainstream the economics of concern here, secure untapped economic opportunities. That's the idea, is that you've got to take on the concerns about biodiversity loss, mass extinction of species, and turn them into economic opportunities. That there's a treasure trove to be unlocked in this. So financialization of nature is about how to make profit from crises. And what's involved in this? So what you have now is a coalition of investment bankers, environmental NGOs, and universities coming together to look at how you can push money into conservation, promoting what? Promoting investment in natural capital. And this is in order to sustain humanity's future on Earth, substantial investment in natural capital is needed. So in order to deliver the volume of investment needed to address the scale of conservation challenges, we need to deliver at scale. Deliver at scale financial returns for investors. It's about an investment opportunity, right? Turning the crisis into an investment opportunity. So you have to have a concerted systemic effort focused on creating investment products. And what are these investment products? Well, the reports go on, and what you see is what they're pushing forwards, as I've constructed this table so that you can see the percentage increase that they have in the kinds of instruments they're expecting to push forward. So they want almost a 3,000% increase in nature-based solutions and carbon offsets, then come biodiversity offsets, then green financial products, and so on. Way down the bottom is government might do something, but they're not really interested in that, clearly. So these are the policy instruments that are being pushed forward. And we can think about, okay, who's pushing this forward? Well, we have this coalition here, which looks quite small, but they've been hard at work. So they've been hard at work taking over environmental NGOs, and putting the members onto the boards of certain NGOs like WWF, but also expanding their alliances into a whole range of NGOs, getting them to start doing biodiversity offsets, carbon offsets, and so on. But it doesn't stop there, of course. Then you've got the United Nations coming on board, bankers coming on board, and in addition to that, of course, we get people like Richard Branson, corporations coming in, and then we get to the financiers, and the financiers coming in, and they start to do venture capitalism, and the venture capitalists expand massively, and so we get into carbon trading, carbon credit trading, and so on. This is a growth industry. That's good. We want growth, don't we? Have to protect it. Okay, and of course, there's lobbying going on a large scale. Think tanks being set up so that they can produce reports. There's a lot of money here. That means it's very easy to create reports and to pay people to do research to produce reports. The United Nations Climate Finance Unit says, embedding nature and climate incentives in trade agreements and by actively developing and supporting businesses that put nature, climate, and equitable benefit sharing at the heart of economic growth. So it's all about putting climate biodiversity at the heart of growth. So trading and offsetting then, financiers creating markets to scale. What does this involve? Creating something at scale is what they need. It's what they want to increase these markets. What you need to do that is, first of all, you have to create harm. You have to have pollution. You have to mine, build on green sites, eradicate species, and so on, eradicate habitats. So you create harm to start with. After you've created harm, then you have to have something that creates good. So we have to equate harm to good. That means you undertake an action which you can equate to the harm, and then you set up a market and you trade, and you have a legal right to do this trading. This is basically what's going on here, creating harm, equating it to good, and then trading. So the markets that they're talking about here, these markets are built on creating equivalence, and that's central to any market. You have to equate one action to another, a harm to a good. So if ecosystems or species are unique, they can't be traded. That means you can't scale your activity. You can't increase it. Scaling up markets requires expanding equivalence. So you have to make sure that you increase the equivalence across species, across habitats, and so on. That's what's going on with the biodiversity markets. Markets assume instrumental functionality. What does that mean? It means that the function that you're trying to trade has to be equivalent across the board. So values relate to a general function. This is why ecosystem services are so popular, because a service is just a service. It doesn't matter where it is, right? Carbon sequestration doesn't matter where on the planet it is. We can do it anywhere. That's the idea. That's equivalence. It denies that there are values concerned with particular types of things. That means that there are no values particular to having a sense of place, where you grew up. Do you like where you lived? It doesn't matter. It's just a place with services. We can put services anywhere. Sense of place, loving a specific tree, loving a location, this is not on the agenda, right? The type of values that we have here. It means species can be lost. A function is all that is valued. We're just measuring functionality. So if whales can sequester carbon, as the World Bank says, and they're worth 2 million according to the World Bank, are they actually more expensive than trees? If they are, forget it, bad investment. So, changing the ecological concepts is what's going on here. The values are being changed from ecological concepts into economic concepts. So what we see is we have nature as capital, so nature is now got to provide a financial return. If it doesn't provide a financial return, then it's not going to get any investment in it, and we can forget about it. So, for example, slowly producing species like whales, old-growth forests, they're bad investments. Get rid of them. Ecosystems as service providers then focus on economic and social values of the ecosystems to the detriment of the idea that humans have any ethical responsibility towards nature, irrespective of its values to humans. So what we have is narrow definitions of instrumental values that can be translated into money and substituted and traded off. So what this means is that there's a new conservation, a push for a new type of conservation. This new conservation pushes very particular approaches. It's instrumental values. Nature is seen as a resource. Moral action is consequentialist. So we end up with doing what's best for humans, central concern with financial returns and growth. There's no absolute protection anymore. Land is going to be managed, developed as a resource. There's neoliberalism implied here. And the policy approach, it relies on corporate responsibility and market mechanisms. And of course, the good news is for business. Financiers and capitalist elites. The good news is that policymakers don't have to choose between protecting nature on the one hand and promoting economic growth on the other. In fact, more business leaders are already choosing to save money, reduce risk, and attract capital by going green. And who says this? Well, what a surprise, one of the richest people in the world. So what we have is business as usual, is what's on the agenda, right? And by extending markets, it's about private property rights, extending these private property rights, and fundamentally obtaining the legal right and economic authority to trade ecosystems functions and non-humans as assets that are only valued if they give a financial return. What about the energy transition? Let's look at that. Okay, so the geopolitics of the energy transition, what we've seen is that the European Union has pushed forward the idea of a European Critical Raw Materials Act. The concern here is that there's going to be an expanding market. So we're going to have an increasing market. So the net zero technologies are set to triple. Things like electric vehicles are going to mean there's an increased demand for lithium, something like 17 times increase by 2050. However, all our lithium comes from China. That's a problem. Okay, so the Act will bring us closer to our climate ambitions, apparently. It's in our mutual interest then to ramp up production. So this is about growth again, growing production. Wind turbines, photovoltaic power systems, electric vehicles, digital technology, and so on. All of these technologies require a whole range of new materials that are going to have to be found. And the report recognizes the EU will never be self-sufficient in supplying such raw materials. So what do? You have to start geopolitically looking for alliances. Where does lithium come from, for example? Australia, Chile, China, no good. So you've got to try and make alliances. Already in Australia, they're ramping up the production. In 2019, the largest mine in the world in Australia is 20% of the global production of lithium. It received permission to double its capacity. In South America, you have the lithium triangle. Now, the other thing is to note here is that these are not clean. Extraction of minerals is not a clean act, right? So in Australia, 1 ton of lithium creates 9 tons of CO2. In South America, it creates less because the lithium is in salt water, salt flats, and you have to use a ton of water, not ton, actually 1.9 million litres of water, 1.9 million litres of water for 1 ton of lithium. Environmental impacts, degradation, and so on. And this is the growth industry. So alliances, the power of the European green transition. So what we see is that the European community is allying with Chile, pushing green economy in Chile, dominant actors, the mining state authorities, the development agency, and also big corporations. Right? At the same time, we have problems that are from just even small producers because they're closer to the European community. So Serbia, some of you may have heard, the kind of things that go in Serbia. The environmental movement manages to get a ban on lithium mining in Serbia, but the German government, the Greens and the European Union are making alliances with the extreme right-wing government there, and Rio Tinto is pushing for continuation of its extraction rights. So what is this? The development paradigm pushing for a new way of extractivism and greenwashing and neo-imperialism. And it has to change. That's what's going on. That's what lies behind it. So we can talk about corporate energy transition. Energy transition is a potential for wealth accumulation, geopolitical dominance, corporate environmentalism, and technocratic capitalist narratives. So within this framework, the issue is of controlling access to energy, materials, and technology. That's the securitization aspect of it. Right? Green colonialism associated with transnational corporations, which in the name of green transition reproduce domination over nature and populations. So what's the alternative? Okay, so let's think about that, if the VU doesn't intervene in my slides too much. Okay, so, oh, they did, there you go. Without CRMs, without the critical raw materials, most sections of society would not be able to function as they are found in many everyday appliances. Products essential to the economy of every member state. So the reason we need to get involved in all of this extraction and these alliances with unsavory characters is because these are essential. So what is essential? In this, the Council of Europe, on their website, say these are essential. Electric vehicles, because we have lithium, cobalt, and nickel. Flying, building and flying aeroplanes, wind turbines, and my favorite, vibrating technologies in phones. What would you do without those? So technology, right? Consider technology. Technology in social, ecological, economic relationships. So technology is not neutral. Technology is socially, ecologically, and economically driven, and it has implications. And why do we need these technologies? Why do we need electric cars? Why do we need to fly? Why do we need vibrating phones? What do we need these technologies? What legitimizes them? You know, if you want to make social change, it's very difficult. If you want to make social change via technology, it's very easy. Introduce the technology, you get social change. And that's what goes on with the corporations. The role of technology in shaping then relationships, they have impacts on social and individual relationships, social and political relationships, human, non-human, and the economics as well, in terms of social provisioning systems and the reproduction of our society. So the shift away from labor, for example, into robotics is something that has just happened, right? And that has implications, of course, for all those supply chains. So infrastructure provision. When we think about infrastructure and providing infrastructure, what does it do? We tend to think of this. This is what the high-tech thinks of. Infrastructure is typically considered as a physical, material concern, high-tech, hard-engineered structures. If you talk about, we're going to create social structures, what do you get for that? You get hard engineering, again, of physical spaces. What's missing from this is actually social infrastructure. Social infrastructure needs to be understood differently. It's about providing community, relationship of care with others, how this is reproduced, via paid and unpaid work, supportive of a care economy. So this is a fundamental difference between the engineering, physical approaches that we see in terms of the economics and so on, and how the things are running and the transformation is being discussed, and what we need, which is social relations. So, social and political relations, we can think about the current technology and the way that is, and we can go through a list, and I haven't got time to go through it, but we can think about the alternatives and the way that alternative technologies could operate. Technology, though, the key point is that technology empowers specific economic actors. Current technology actually supports a specific and narrow range of economic systems and social relations. And it denies the possibility of alternatives, the potentiality. So alternative social ecological economies are excluded by technology and the approaches that are going on. So, relationships to nature, which I've touched on very briefly already. Again, current technology is very specific about this relationship to nature. So, ecologically dangerous, heavily polluting, artificial systems, estrangement from nature, destruction of non-human life, and so on. It doesn't have to be like that, but that's what we're told we have to do, right? There's the technologies. And as I've pointed out as well, the current policy debates approach of economics is heavily biased in their treatment of nature. Capitalist approaches, ecosystems as productive service providers, commodification, offsetting, financialization. So these are the relationships with nature. And if we look at the position of the dominant hegemonic kind of systems that we get discussed, it's about capitalism, neoliberalism, even the welfare economy based around the same kind of systems, sustainable development, bio and high tech, and green growth. But there is alternatives. We can have communitarianism, eco-socialism, care economy, post-development, appropriate technology, or degrowth. So what we have is, this is a utopian vision. They don't discuss it like that, right? They always say they're realists, but actually it's a utopia. And this is an alternative utopia. So this top utopia based on capital accumulation systems, cost shifting onto others, individualism, high tech, as opposed to based on scientific understanding of biophysical and social reality, community, appropriate technology, eco-social ethics, and a scientific or concrete utopia. Conclusions. So, economies as alternative provisioning systems is what we want to consider. And I would say economies, it's a plural. There is no such thing as just a singular economy. Technology transforms relationships with respect to others, both human and non-human. Technology is not neutral. Social-ecological crises and systemic transformation, what is called the economy, is a specific form of system that entails destructive relationships between economy, society, and biophysical reality. So the social-ecological crisis is being created by the system, and perpetuating that system will not remove the crisis. Materialist and technical fixes, which is what we're being offered with green economies and bioeconomies and so on, entail a specific set of social relationships that can also be recognized as perpetuating social and ecological crises. There's no singular economy, even within market capitalism. There are varieties of capitalism, varieties of relationships, and the same was true of the Soviet era and the socialist economies. There's variety, but more than this, there are actual alternatives. We're told continuously there is no alternative. This is the only system that we can have. There are alternatives. People do live differently, and there are alternative means of social provisioning, but there is also the potentiality that is being denied, the potential for more systems, for different types. We need radically different thinking to establish social-ecological transformation and to recognize the full potentiality of alternative social provisioning systems. So, social provisioning to meet human needs within an ethical framework of care and justice for others, both human and non-human. When I was at the Beyond Growth conference, I said to Van der Leyen in the public parliament, she was advocating a social market economy. I said, no, we don't need a social market economy. We need a social ecological economy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Clive, for this thought-provoking, maybe also emotionally talk. It was a good start, I think, for our discussion, a very good start. Before we come to our panelists here, your statements around what Clive said, I would like to introduce you with a few words. And as said before, we're going to have one round here and then open to you. We are happy to get questions, also comments, as long as there are no co-talks. So please try to be as concise and short as possible so that we can hear many of you. This would be really, really appreciated. All right, I'd like to, I go alphabetically now. Clive, the click thing, is it, do you have it? Oh, no, it's here.
I left it over there.
No, no, it's I'd like to start with Ursula Bittner and introduce her. Ursula, Uschi, she holds a degree in international development from the University of Vienna, internationale Entwicklung, and also an MBA degree from a US, the Californian Lutheran University, and also you have also been to the Diplomatic Academy of Vienna, so bist auch eine Diplomatin, you're also a diplomat. Currently, she's working at Greenpeace CEE as an economic expert on democracy, compliance, and civil society greenwashing, here we have it, and also on trade, supply chains, agriculture, and biodiversity. Besides her work at Greenpeace, she is also very active. On the one hand, she co-founded Donau Soja, some might know it of you, and she was also general secretary there. Then in 21, you founded the initiative Saubere Hände. This is to stop corruption. And the youngest baby, I would say, from 24, with other co-founders, you started Ans Licht. This is an initiative supporting whistleblowers. Welcome, Ursula Bittner. Then I come to you, Jutta. Jutta Kiel just came from Berlin. Lucky the train was only 1 hour late, so we have you here on time. She's a biologist, an activist, researcher, and a writer, and for also a long time, more than 20 years, she has documented how conservation, certification, and forest carbon projects have caused conflicts with peasant communities and also indigenous people or peoples. She has published extensively on carbon markets, biodiversity offsetting, and the role of the new economy of nature in maintaining ecologically unequal trade and associated violation of human rights. So also very welcome, very warm welcome to you, Jutta. Then we have Vincent Vincent Liéger, French man living in Hungary, in Budapest, also all the way by train from Budapest here. Vincent is also an activist, researcher, and a writer. You have an engineer background, but you call yourself interdisciplinary researcher, consultant, and lecturer on degrowth, post-growth, and ecological economics. He is co-author of many books around degrowth, for instance, Exploring Degrowth, a Critical Guide, and he also is a founder of different initiatives, for instance, one called Cargonomia. This is a center for research and experimenting on degrowth, and also a social cooperative for sustainable logistical solutions and local food distribution in Budapest. And you are also one of the co-organizers of the degrowth conferences. The next is in June in Oslo, together with the conference of the International Society for Ecological Economics. Welcome, Vincent. And then I'm happy to welcome Christina Planck. Christina holds a PhD in political sciences, and she's a senior scientist at BOKU, an institute for, thank you, I didn't write it, Entwicklungsforschung, development research. She works on political ecology, governance, and social-ecological transformation, with a focus on critical agrarian studies, so food, agriculture, and CSA and so on are your topics in different projects. And especially now you're working on how the dominant agricultural and food system is again dominated by transnational corporations. And this is again then based on competition. And what does this mean for a just and sustainable system? Is it possible at all under these framework conditions? We'll hear more about you also in a second. Welcome, Christina. Now we know all about you. we use this short break to, at least to breathe. So you see we have a diverse group here, and I'm very happy that you all said yes to the invitation by Clive. And Jutta, I'll start with you in a second. The topic now is the negative role of offsetting and carbon training, or the UN initiatives on deforestation, especially in developing countries, called nature-based solutions. You've worked a lot on this. I quite, let's say straight, ask you, why are these policies failing?
I guess the question that I'll use the microphone. I guess the question that I would return is failing for whom? Because a lot of the market-based policies related to the green transition, related to green growth, are not failing for everybody, I guess, like most policies do. When we look at carbon offsetting, at compensation, so continuing to destroy, like Clive said, you can equate harm in one place, Clive, you said, with good in another place. I think I would challenge that a little bit and say with supposed good in another place. The last 20 years or more by now, I have spent a lot working with communities in the Global South who have lost access to land and their land for a lot of those policies that are related to the green transition. For them, they are not working because for a lot of the population in the Global South, access to land is what feeds people. Green transition means losing access to that land. So equating harm with good is good perhaps in the propaganda brochures, but in the reality, that equation of good or harm in one place and compensating that in another means a lot of harm, a lot of land grabbing, and a lot of losing access or facing restrictions to land in faraway places. Those policies do not work for a large part of the global population. They do work for the extractivist companies. When we think of the oil companies, almost all of them posted record profits in the last year. The extraction curve is still on the rise for most of them. And yet, when we look around us in the industrialized countries, we can buy green oil, green heating oil, we can buy carbon neutral, we can drive carbon neutral cars. The bigger and the heavier, the better. They're still carbon neutral, we are told. So those policies are working very well for the largest part of the extractivist industry because the policies that have been implemented, compensation policies, carbon offsetting, now increasingly biodiversity offsetting, mean business can go on as usual with a green tinge because the extraction continues. It isn't getting less. On the other hand, corporate control over land is duplicated because the companies now not only have first call over what land is being used at the site of extraction, where the minerals are taken out of the ground, where the oil is taken out of the ground. Priority is also given to the corporate needs at the site of compensation. The local community is not allowed to continue entering the forest to gather firewood because the forest has been labeled a carbon forest. So the oil company can say, I am selling green, climate neutral, carbon neutral oil. That's two places where the corporate control over land takes precedent over human communities' needs for land. And when we think about the scale of material flows, Clive, you touched on that a few times, I think that the big question that isn't being discussed nearly enough is the question of how much do we have to reduce material flows, not just of oil, but of stuff. Because if not, the lithium, the cobalt, the whatever will run out sooner rather than later. And we haven't discussed at what level of material consumption do we believe transition is possible. Adding to that the question of not just the level of material flow, but the justness of levels of material flow. The whole focus of discussion around transition policies has moved to the technicalities of the limit, the technicalities of the technologies, and not the question, what are we producing? Who is the we? And who decides what is produced by whom and for whom? That's the first question that as society we are not finding the courage to discuss. Because for most of us in Europe, it means radically rethinking what we value. And it means giving up what we have come to be used to, privileges, if justice is to play a role in a transition. Without discussing the level of material flow that any transition that deserves the term justice can maintain, the reality of transition will inevitably and unavoidably be harm and human pain at the other side of the world. Because transition, without discussing where the limits of material flow are, will mean more corporate control over land in many places of the world.
Thank you, Jutta. I would like to grab in here. It's not a question we have prepared, but it just came to my mind. Just a short answer, but we can maybe continue in this line. In the afternoon before coming here, I was reading a paper in Gaia on sufficiency by a couple of authors from the Umweltrat and also the Helmholtz Center for Environmental Research. And there was one quotation in here that says, sufficiency, which is, they put it synonymously to less material flows and less material and energy input. Sufficiency will meet social resistance. What would you answer them? You said we do need sufficiency. My question would be, you don't have to answer it now, but maybe also to the panel, how can we make this popular, maybe this is the wrong word, but interesting, attractive, so that no resistance is there, or less? Maybe you have just a short answer before we continue. Yeah,
extractivism is meeting resistance wherever it's taking place, and it's taking lives.
Okay.
And it's where we have to relearn, and it will be difficult, and getting even more difficult with the days of facing very difficult discussions. Otherwise, the next generation, if we don't have the courage to really ask much more difficult questions than we're asking today, those who come after us have even less space to discuss them, because the material limitations aren't going to go away. And the level of material flow, if we do not manage to find that, the world that those who come after us will find and have to live in isn't going to be a pretty place. So no alternative to saying, you know, we continue and the lithium has to come from somewhere. It means it will not be a pretty place. So I think it's a question of responsibility of our generation as well, those who are making the decisions or pushing them to the future. But resistance is there, and it's growing, because losing your land, where do you go?
Okay, thank you for this, for your thoughts. Ushi, I may now come to you. Amongst your research, or your activities especially, there has been research on advocacy for better food supply systems. And you are critical of initiatives such as CSR, corporate social responsibility, genetic crops, biofuels. And a major issue has been, as we have heard, greenwashing and also corruption. And you're working for Greenpeace as an economist, Greenpeace CEE, and Greenpeace is very critical to offsets, for instance. Can you tell me why? Of course, it's greenwashing behind, but maybe you want to say some words where this criticism is coming from, elaborate on it, and also some NGOs, Clive mentioned, like WWF and others, they are quite dependent on money, on sources from corporates, and they need these funds also for things they do which might be good. So how can they behave in this situation? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Yes, Greenpeace is a big criticizer of offsetting, and why we are that is basically what you just said, more or less. And when you were asking who is losing or why we are failing, I think we're losing all with these policies because we're just losing time. Lots of time we really need, and that's also the difference between the 70s or 80s when all the environmental movement came up. Today we just do not have any time, and these false solutions, we call it, just take us time for really stopping the climate crisis or the biodiversity crisis. Offsetting is a very cynical way of greenwashing, and I also have to say that greenwashing is often seen as a very not very dangerous thing, like a Kavaliersdelikt, we would say in German, whatever the English word for that is. Maybe you know, but actually it's greenwashing is really a harm for us all, because I compare it with giving you a medicine because you're sick and this medicine is not working. You will not maybe look for another medicine because you think it's all fine. And that's basically what happens with greenwashing and also with offsetting mechanisms. Why is it so cynical also is when we look at the past, when the global north, we say, even though it's maybe not the perfect term, took resources from the global south in colonialism and after colonialism. And then all the sustainability movement came up, and then we started to certify those products with FSC and MSC, and maybe you all know that, and saying it's green products and we can still take it from the global south because we now certify it. And now, with offsetting, we even outsource our environmental protection, and that's why it's so cynical. We close areas, as you just said, in the global south, because we say we do environmental protections. And funny, I had a half a year studied at the WU, so just for fun, for 6 months. I don't know why I did it, but actually I did it. And one of the professors, I was already finished my first study, and I was looking for a job, and there was all 18 years old, 19 years old people sitting in the room, and I was back then 24, 25, I think. And then it was the professor who was like teaching the students, saying, you know, human resources are the most expensive one. It's like, like employment is the most expensive one from a company. So outsource whatever you can, And you can imagine, I studied international development, totally different culture there, about globalization and child work and so on. And I was really shocked because I saw all these 18 years old people noting, outsource. And I just learned t-shirt production in Bangladesh and how horrible it is. And so I think this is like how we treat and how we do and the economics is so wrong, and is offsetting just shows how wrong it is, how we think. And especially not only talking about what Jutta just said about the global south, for us it's also, even the project would be like super perfect, if there would be really nice projects, the system is just wrong, because the company who say we are climate neutral or whatever they say, it is not like the flight or the product or whatever you do is not changing their environmental impact just because you protect a forest in the global south. And I try really to explain that to the actors I'm talking to, but it's pretty hard to get this message to them, because they're constantly saying, but these projects are so good, and we have to close all the projects now, but they do not understand what it really means for not be able to change the economy, to not be able to get this transformation we so urgently need. And that's basically we fight for. And your second question about NGOs, yes, I saw the logos on the presentation, and I think, yes, environmental organizations or NGOs in general are very important, just saying as a general message, because I think we also call it the fifth pillar of a democracy, next to the independent media. Because it's kind of a balance and a watchdog for politics and for companies. Because especially advocacy NGOs maybe, because there are lots of NGOs who do caretaking and so on, that's a different story. But Greenpeace is an advocacy NGO, we do a lot of politics and so on. So I see us as very important for the balance and to do checks and balances, to criticize them, to be a representative of the environment, and that's something the politicians and the companies also must understand. We're not here for compromises or nice discussions. We're fighting for environmental rights and also human rights, because that's part of environmental rights. Obviously, humans are part of the environment. But yes, there are organizations who are very much dependent on fundings from corporations or the government. Mm-hmm. That's why Greenpeace is not taking any money from the government, not taking any money from corporations. We just have individual donors who fund our organization. That's very nice, because also in our daily business we can really freely decide what we do. Others organizations cannot. But I think it's not only the financial issue, it's also that people trust in environmental organization very much. Like we, as I said, we are here for defending environment, and then people trust us, so corporations are really much interested to get this reputation of organizations for their products, and that's why you sometimes find some logos on products and so on. We would never do that. And we think this is very critical. Mm-hmm. When organizations helping corporations to do this greenwashing, follow this greenwashing or false solutions, and maybe at the beginning they don't even know that they're doing that, because I have to admit Greenpeace was part of FSC at the beginning because we thought it's the right way to certify Tropenholz. Wood from the
rainforest, tropical.
Of course, yeah, tropical wood. Was not so difficult vocabulary. I'm sorry. We thought it's a good idea to certify those wood and bring it still to the markets in the global north. But then we very soon found out it's not a good idea, and so we stepped out of FSC. Other organizations are still there, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. and promoting those certification schemes, which are absolutely not working. And we. What can I say else than
don't
we're really,
have to say anything
really
more,
critical about it, especially.
I mean, you don't have to be forced to say.
No, but I already did. But it's just to underline the message. We think it's really, really critical, especially because people see us as independent, reliable, and so on. And so that's why NGOs must be very careful.
Yeah, it's true. And I see there is a trade-off, and sometimes trade-offs cannot be solved. But naming it, mentioning it, making it transparent is maybe the first step, I would say. That's why I said you don't have to find the solution here. Christina Blanke, I'd like to come to you now. We coming back to the, or not coming back, we come to the topic now of food systems and agrarian studies. Critical agrarian studies is in the focus of your work, among other topics. As said before, you're a political scientist, you come from political ecology, from social-ecological transformation. With all this background, what would you say, what needs to change so that we can really come to a just and environmentally sustainable food system?
Is it on? Yeah. Good evening also from my side. What needs to change? I want to refer here to the report many people might have heard of already, because many scientists also from the EU have been involved in the APCC special report, Structures for Climate-Friendly Living. But I think it's very nice to have it as a summary. I co-authored a food chapter with Karl Michael Brunner, also still, I guess, working at the EU or retiring soon, and Marianne Penker from BOKU. And we were having the task of summarizing kind of literature for food system transformation, referring mostly to Austria, in the context of climate change, climate crisis, and social crisis. And other people were having other topics, other provisioning systems, mobility housing, and so on. And there was also a theoretical chapter on transformation pathways. You can read it. It's also available in English as a summary if you go to the website, Strukturen für klimafreundliches Leben, just as an add-on. And there I want to refer to what Clive has been saying, that you've been mostly referring to the market and the technological innovation perspective that are kind of mentioned there as two pathways which are prevailing in societal discourse, but also, I guess, in research. We haven't quantified that, but probably most of academic research is also being done out of those two perspectives. Whereas then there's other two pathways, which is the one of provisioning, you were also mentioning, although there's like different kinds of understanding of provisioning, as we know, and the societal perspective. And we're going to hear more about that from myself, but also then from Vincent, because they're it's social movements who are really like crucial actors within that. So coming back now to the food system, what we stated there in terms of what is the status quo, so what needs to change is we know that the global food system is responsible for about 1/3 of the greenhouse gas emissions globally, and there is a great potential in reducing emissions in livestock farming. That's one thing. There is also great potential, or another important area for reducing greenhouse gases is the reduction of food waste and dietary practices like what we eat, meaning we eat too much meat and sugar, referring maybe as one of the prominent examples of where we can be more sufficient in production but also in consumption, is one important field. What we also identified in that report, and there is, I don't know if they're today in the audience, but I got interviewed from SEEP students last week, if I'm not mistaken, who work on how supermarkets can work from a social provisioning perspective. So I'm looking forward to your results, because in that report we haven't really found much literature on processing industry, but also on retail chains. And these are very important. This is a very important gap between like producers and consumers. Although what Jutta has been saying about access of land, this is very crucial, not only in the global south, but also in the north. But if you look at who are crucial and important actors and who need to be on board or at least thought about, it's also everything in between production and consumption. So now, normatively speaking, what needs to change? In the report, we identified it as four analytically areas of conflicts, but I would just say it's, normatively speaking, the transformation of politics. So we need integrative food policies, not only containers that talk about agriculture, health, I don't know, consumer policies, but really to have an integrative perspective on that. That's one thing. Second, I already mentioned the topic of meat. So we face an overproduction of meat, and that's based on very cheap animal feed, fossil energy. So we need to reduce meat production and consumption. We need to have just labor relations, because from the cultivation, if you look at the conditions of harvesters are facing, up to the food workers, if you think what we have been hearing about, especially during the pandemic, labor conditions are not just. And then the fourth conflict is that we need, especially again, this is referring to us researcher in academia, different systems of knowledge productions, or acknowledging different forms of knowledge, is referring to like even more transdisciplinary research.
Thank you very much for this clear answer and these different structures you've explained. Vincent, I'd like to come to you now. We are now going a bit more on a meta level. You are a strong advocate of degrowth. Of course, you're working in this area very actively as a researcher, writer, but also as an activist. And you're also involved in initiatives to improve urban living and reconnect with people, or reconnect people with nature. How do you see degrowth as a movement playing a role here in this reconnection, which is part, or an important part, of a socio-ecological transformation? What is the current role? What can degrowth really do here?
Yeah, first let's go back to history of degrowth, because it started 23 years ago, and we had the intuition, which turned out to be right, to use, and Vice President was a bit stressed about provocative slogans, or provocative title of the conference, to use a very provocative slogan, degrowth. And we wanted to do so for two main reasons, which turned out to be right. The first one, that we need to have a type of slogan which is not co-optable by the dominant system. And in the last 23 years going through, we've been observing, one after the other one, beautiful slogans, beautiful concepts, very often, or most of the time, first initiated and supported by very serious and honest people, who've been one after the other one co-opted by the dominant system, reappropriated by the dominant system. The concept of greenwashing we spoke about, I found the first usage in the 1970s, but now it became very highly famous. And we decided to do degrowth to protect ourselves from greenwashing. And we can even speak not only about greenwashing, but green, social, convivial washing. Nowadays, advertisement to sell their products, which are exactly the same than decades ago in terms of environmental impact, are using a lot of beautiful principles you may find behind degrowth and a lot of other beautiful concepts and so on. So it was the first intuition, to have a slogan which is not co-optable by the dominant system. And to do so, we need a word, we need a slogan, which is attacking directly the central belief or religion of the dominant system we are living in. We are living in a society which is around the religion of growth. And Clive, you show some example from very serious people, very serious organization and reports. Growth is everywhere. Growth is the answer for everything. And nobody says what we speak about when we speak about growth. What's really behind? I won't lecture you about that. No, but the idea was really to attack all this belief and to offer a provocative slogan, to create a movement, to really open the right debate, to put on the table the right question, and to invite the society, to invite the people, to decolonize our imaginary. To quote Mark Twain, if you have a hammer looking like a nail, if you have in your head a hammer, you see all the problem looking like nails. And the hammer we have in our head, it's economics, is economic growth. And we see all the problem from this perspective. So degrowth is an invitation to decolonize our imaginary, to try to understand the challenge of the 21st century in a much more complex and qualitative way than what is taught in the beautiful university where we are today. I quote this university, but it's unfortunately the case all around the Western world nowadays and so on. And to liberate ourselves, to emancipate ourselves, to be free, to start to invent, experiment, implement alternative ways of life, which would be constructed based on new types of principles like conviviality, autonomy, care, low-tech, permaculture, agroecology, agroforestry, commons, open relocalization. I can add a lot of beautiful concepts like that and so on. So the good point with degrowth, we had some victories. The fact that I'm still here speaking about it is one of the victories. Unfortunately, we are more and more invited also in the corporate world. Among the worst people you quoted, we received in the last year some invitations. So when I say that we haven't been co-opted yet, I should add, because I see some signs that we may be ending up like anybody else, be co-opted by the dominant system, as we are facing a type of asymmetric war, considering the fact that, and it's one of the victories of degrowth, we can see nowadays emerging majorities of people who will find themselves around the principles defended for degrowth. It's one of the questions you ask. Why do we face social resistance? Actually, we don't have such direct social resistance. There is no demonstrations of people looking for more innovation, for green growth, for more destructions, and so on and so on. You have demonstrations against it and so on. But people are more like alienating to this system and so on. And when you ask them the question, there are a lot of converging surveys about that. They would rather rationally choose what you will find behind degrowth, which will mean less, but in sharing more, in slowing down, much more quality time, meaningful jobs, reconnect with nature, reconnect with each other, focus on caring economy and so on. You see emerging majorities behind these principles. And people are ready to move under two main conditions. The first one, it has to be democratic. When I say democratic, I don't speak about elections, what we see how they are turning into something quite weird. I speak about new democratic processes which will be brought with creativity, like the Citizen Convention for Climate, which took place in France. It was an interesting example. And when you give the opportunity and time to the people to deliberate on key questions, you end up with what you will find behind degrowth. So it has to be democratic, and it has to be fair, which means that the richer you are, the bigger the effort should be for you. And the poorer you are, the more you will get opportunities to emancipate out of the situation you face right now. So there are some victories around degrowth. It has become an interesting movement. It's been debated in the EU Parliament. It's been debated in a lot of places all around the world. It's a very active academic movement. There are the international degrowth conferences, a lot of publications, and so on. But as I said, obviously we failed. Not only us, I mean all of us, all the degrowth and related movements failed, as we've been failing since the birth of modernity, capitalism, industrialism, development, and so on. We have a lot of old friends who face the same situation and so on. This mega machine is highly powerful, is out of control, in the hand of crazy people with very, very, very strong networks and power. We've just seen what's happened in the United States recent elections. And we are in a situation which is highly frightening, where on one hand, majorities are emerging, and on the other hand, the power balance is really asymmetrical, and we have to find a way to rebalance that.
Thank you. Thank you very much to the four of you. No more words from my side. I'd like to ask you now for questions. We'll collect a couple of them. And please, if you want to address the question to a person of the panel, please also say it. Otherwise, we collect, and whoever wants to answer will answer. There will be people around with, it's hard to see here with the Scheinwerfer, with microphones. I see one hand there with a white pullover, white sweater. We start here. Yeah.
Hi. This question is addressed to the first panelist. I'm really sorry I forgot your name.
Greenpeace, Uschi, yeah.
Yes. So,
Jutta.
Yeah. So, you worked with indigenous communities in developing countries, and you know, especially with communities that have been threatened due to these regimes, right? So, but these communities in themselves, since you worked with them, you must know that they have their own treasury of such beautiful, like, knowledge systems when it comes to living in harmony with the rest of nature, and how to kind of balance your economic needs and environmental needs, everything, you know, how you give and take from the environment. How do you think we can work with their knowledge systems and integrate this into whatever you want to call it, green transition or degrowth, or into, you know, changing towards such alternatives?
Thank you very much. I have here a hand and here, maybe. Yes. Okay, yes.
Yes, thank you so much. My question goes out to the entire panel. First and foremost, Clive, Spash. I think everybody in this room is here because we see that our current system and thereby capitalism seems to be hitting a wall. But there's, I think, one really interesting feature of capitalism, which is that it seems to be self-sustaining. It seems to be defending itself against a lot of these attacks. So my question is there a way to build an alternative that has a similar mechanic in that it is self-sustaining and robust and does not require this constant active management? And if it is, how do we get there?
Okay, thank you. Good question. Okay. Yeah, hello, servus.
Yeah, hello. I have a question for the whole panel, and the question is, how do you stay positive? I like your energy. I really like and appreciate all your energy and the way you present the things you were sharing with us, and how I feel you involved and concerned about what's going on. So I was lucky to be at Clive's welcome lecture when he took over the chair at the Department of Socioeconomics. I'm very happy to be here today. And what it boils down for me, what I'm hearing is it's a lot of changing power relations that is taking place, and all the rhetoric about the markets and all the rhetoric about growth and what we are living, you know, in the United States and what we are living all over Europe. I mean, just to give you kind of the background of that question, in my own teaching about socio-economic transformation and environmental crisis, I find it increasingly difficult. Even though it's exciting to inspire, you know, young people and to give them a background and critical thinking skills. But at the same time, I find it challenging sometimes, you know, to find the energy and not to take it somewhere else.
This is a very good question for the final round. I'll ask it to you again we have a final round. I have then 2 questions, thank you. So we can take 1 or 2 more. There is a hand over there. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I can stand up as well. My question was raised before, but I want to give it to the whole panel. How can we make the idea of sufficiency, degrowth, just less? How can we make it more attractive, more sexy?
That's the word I didn't say, but I meant it as well. And then we have here 1 question, and then I think I'll come back to the panel.
Thank you. My question would be generally to you. Do you have sometimes the feeling doing here to get better in a green future that it is self-defiance? Because, for example, if I remember to Norway, on the one way they do decarbonization, they want to store carbon dioxide. On the other way, they are using fossil products like gas to purify it into liquid gas and to supply it to, for example, Europe. Or if I go here to Austria, some few hundred kilometers away, we have exploration of natural gas. On the other hand side, few hundred meters above, the Austrian federal forest sells its carbon dioxide rights. So for me, it's a kind of self-defiance. How do you deal with it in your academic work?
Thank you. Okay, I start with you, Clive. Is this okay with you? I see 3 questions, and you might want to choose which to answer, and as concise as possible. One would be, how can an alternative also be as robust or self-sustaining as capitalism? The other is then, how can sufficiency, degrowth, and so become really more sexy, attractive? And the last one, how do you deal with self-defiance?
What's the last one, sorry?
How do you deal with this self-defiance?
Self-defiance.
And this kind of inconsistency that exists.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess, I mean, in terms of capitalism, I would say that capitalism is heavily managed, actually. It's not a robust system that doesn't operate, that operates as some kind of independent thing. And it's gone through phases. I mean, so the French Regulation School, I think, is quite good on this, discussing how capitalism has gone through different phases. You know, the capitalism of the 1800s with Marx is not the same capitalism as today. So you've gone through different regimes, like the Fordist regime, the change in factory systems. We can talk about the welfare state. We can talk about the ways in which there have been counter-movements and mechanisms that have preserved capitalism when it's hit the wall. You know, and so it isn't that capitalism is totally robust, but it's adaptable, and it has adapted. The other thing is there is no such thing as a pure single capitalism. As I was saying, there are many forms, right? So there are different relationships of capital accumulation. We've been through phases where it's been heavily regulated, and then this has been rolled back over the last 50 years. So again, this is why we're now in an even bigger crisis than we were, say, in the 1970s, we could say. Even though ecologically, the 1970s was no better than today. It's just that we're further down the road to disaster ecologically. So I would say it's not about creating robust a system like capitalism. It's about institutions and institutional frameworks and how society runs. If you want to look at robust structures, we could look at the Roman Empire. It lasted for 500 years. You know, capitalism's only been around for a couple of hundred. So, you know, you can actually, I'm quite serious about this actually, you know, is to look at history and look at long periods of history and how humans have survived and how they have sustained themselves over millennia outside of the capitalist system, which is actually very modern. So then we get into a whole range of different things about institutions of cooperation, solidarity, redistribution, and different social provisioning systems. And these have been extremely robust. You know, as I say, capitalism is a new form, and it's not very robust, actually. That's why we're in a disaster, in a crisis right now. I would look at alternative institutions, I'd look at history, I would look at diversity. When I gave my talk, I said there are things that are actual. There are actual social provisionings that exist. Not everybody is in capitalism. Many people are outside of it and being oppressed by capitalism, or resisting it, fighting against it, and so on and so forth. Okay, how to make sufficiency more sexy or attractive? Well, I'm not sure that I'm the right person to answer this question.
Then you don't have to. Maybe we get other, other answers.
I would, but I would say that, I mean, you know, there are many things, probably Vincent will tell us that, you know, there are many attractive things about degrowth, right, being the conviviality, the community. Mm-hmm. The problem I see is that it's not about marketing it, which is what this is really about, you know, sticking a naked woman in front of sufficiency or something, you know, or having her lie there. I mean, this is like the marketing department will do. It's actually about pointing out the problems that there are with the kind of society that we have that are actually denigrating people's lifestyles and marginalizing people, creating divisions in society, and showing how you can live a perfectly good life outside of this. And also preventing the ongoing erosion of people who are already living in sufficiency. You know, if you look at what's going on in countries like China or India, they're destroying rural livelihoods and rural ways of living. There are very high rates of suicide amongst farmers, for example, in India, because their sufficiency lifestyles are being destroyed in order to bring them into the growth economy and to take away their already traditional ways of living. So I would say that's an issue. The third question, I don't think I really understood the third question as such. It was about there's a kind of element of self-defiance. And this self-defiance is, how should I understand this?
On the one hand, for example, if I take Norway,
yeah.
They are doing an decarbonization to store it in fewer natural resources. On the other hand side, they produce natural gas. Yeah,
so they're doing both things at the same time, is what you're saying.
Kind of
okay,
conflict.
Yeah, I mean, there's tremendous hypocrisy in the system, right? This is one of the problems. I mean, Norway is great, isn't it? So Norway has a massive arms industry, and it gives the Peace Prize. You know, I mean, and most people don't realize the size of the Norwegian arms industry. You know, then they have massive oil extraction, which they have sensibly, we could say, put into an oil fund, a large part of it, unlike other nations which have just squandered it or given it to billionaires or multinational corporations. But what do they do with that? Well, then they kind of, we could say they're into greenwashing. So they have the oil money, and then they do some benevolent things, but they actually invest it on the stock exchange as well. But this is a systemic problem, right? So what you've got is, we could say, we're back to issues of democracy, accountability. What do we really expect to get out of the political systems we have? Representative democracy is, as I think Vincent touched on, is a failure. It's not real democracy. I don't think we have democracy. I think democracy is a great idea. I'd love to have some. You know.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Clive. Jutta, you were addressed directly by the first question. How can this very specific and valuable knowledge we have in different communities be part of the transition? How can we integrate it and learn, if you so want, from peasants, indigenous communities, and so on?
Yeah, I think first in listening to them and perhaps not integrating and absorbing, but looking at where is the way we live still eroding other life forms, other life systems, and other values. For me, the point comes back to values, and I think we live in difficult times, but also in very exciting times. This is a time where the main energy carrier that has provided us with the easy life that we have had for generations in Europe and the industrialized world will have to change. That's a huge transformation. So running into contradictions, running into very difficult moments because it's about shifting of power, it's about shifting of privileges, giving up on one side and giving some to others, I think is what we're living. So it is a difficult time, but it's also an exciting time. And that means also it opens opportunities for us to rethink values. When I think we are at the university, for me, one of the core needs that is there in our times is a lot more questioning. When I see the contradictions and the intellectual corruption that is embedded in some of the policies around offsetting and net zero, I think, where are the voices that say, this is, excuse my language, bullshit? And I mean bullshit in the philosophical sense. It is. You look it up, and you read Harry Frankfurter's little booklet on bullshit. He's a philosopher. Okay. And he said it makes it very difficult to debate if there isn't a lie on the other side, because you can catch a lie, but you cannot catch a bullshitter. Because bullshitting, the idea or the trouble with bullshitting in the philosophical sense is the arguments are made to further your interests. It doesn't matter whether what is being said is true or not. The only purpose is I make it up to serve my interest. And there is a role for intellectual integrity to catch out that process of making things up to further interests. And when we look at net zero policies, at carbon and biodiversity offsetting policies, the intellectual corruption at the heart of those is stunning. And yet, they have made it from the periphery into the center of climate policy. That's a disaster. Not only because it doesn't address the climate crisis, not only because offsetting means double land grabs and more control for corporations over land. It also means we are complicit in not calling out the intellectual corruption that goes along with making things equivalent that are not possible to consider equivalent. So when it comes to other knowledge systems, I think, yes, they have a lot to offer, but we have a lot to expose in the knowledge systems that are paving the way for continued destruction, because offsetting, and maybe that's sort of, I end with that, the point that I wanted to add still in my first round. Okay. Offsetting and net zero policies mean this is the way for perpetual destruction. You can, if you agree, if you start to agree that offsetting and compensation is a possibility, that net zero is a better possibility than zero emissions or destruction, we have agreed to saying there is no such thing as uniqueness of place. Because in order to compensate harm with alleged good, you have to deny that the place that's being harmed and destroyed is not unique enough so that it is replaceable. And if we do that, we give up a whole lot of value and attachment to place that we will very urgently need.
Thank you for this. It was quite a long, but very, very important answer. Before I come to you and ask you if you want to say something to this capitalism question or the sufficiency question, I want to see how many questions are in the audience. Still, 1, 2, any more? 3, 4, 5. Okay, yeah, I'd like to 4 to 5 I can take. Any important or any amendments you want to make to the questions or the answers that have been made? You can, if you want, and if, then please be short. Or you add it to the next round then. Okay, yeah, but if you want to say something, keep it in mind. Okay, so hands again, please. We start here, please. So okay. Then the lady here in the first row, he wants to think about the question.
I understand that our philosophy and economic system is based on a lie because we can't grow endlessly. And Jesus, if we grew endlessly, that would be terrible. I mean, the thing is, like, as a controller, I know that it's very difficult to replace an existing system by a new one without running all the risks. From this, from all the important things you said, I understood that we need to replace growth by change. Maybe to introduce the concept of changing instead of basically growing on the same. Mm-hmm. The thing is, how could we have a liberal system that enables change? And change means making mistakes and growing and learning from mistakes, and at the same time ensure that we have a stable system where people have a fair life and, of course, all the things that matters, like hygienic systems and so on, because mm-hmm. this is something that can be lost really fast.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, okay?
I guess one question that I've had following politics over the past few years is that there's a lot of criticism of Western governments dragging their feet on transitioning to more renewable technologies and energy sources, yet, and we've also heard that fossil fuels are much more profitable, so maybe there's a plan to not really transition, but just stay on fossil fuels, drag the feet and all this. But at the same time, we're seeing a lot of foreign policy now centering itself around critical minerals, you know, trying to acquire these, acquiring access to these minerals. So are we seeing like a shift genuinely, or are these new geopolitical policies just kind of a ruse to make the public think that something is
a shift to?
Happening? Pardon me?
Are we seeing a shift towards what?
A shift towards more renewable technologies and energy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah. So we go to this side, please. Danke. Thank you.
Hello. I would be interested how many pollution is created by these new large ships who are cruising from America to Europe with this liquid gas. I kind of understand that we don't buy gas from Russia, but how much is created by these large ships? Because I wanted to buy a holiday on this cruise, but I read everywhere that it creates so much pollution. And how many ships are additionally now on Atlantic Ocean because of this?
Okay, I'm not sure if the panel can answer, but maybe there is some ideas there. We have. Let's see how many. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, this is okay. 3 more.
Yeah, my question is also to, well, Jutta and Ursula, I think, mainly. I think we all understand by now that offsetting is not only not working, but doubly bad. But are there any measures that are currently being taken within the current system that are actually valuable or even paving the way towards a transition? Or are they just all kind of greenwashing that are keeping us from actual change?
Thank you. Here and here. Then we have 7. That's quite a lot. Let's see.
Thanks for the nice talk. So my question goes to the relationship between degrowth and science. So I remember a piece from a book. I will paraphrase. It goes something like, "We don't need professional communities. We don't need communities of professionals. We need professional communities." So we obviously are very aware of the ties that academic science currently has with the capitalist system and the extractive economy. So I'm also working in the biological field, and sometimes wondering whether by our constant work and reporting in these areas we are actually producing a narrative similar to the medicine analogy you have mentioned, that we are giving a medicine and pretending it's so fine and the solution is around the corner, but we are basically perpetrating a narrative by there's not going to be a large paradigm change in a paradigm. So should science change to a community-based and not a professional-based system? What are your thoughts on that one?
Thank you. We have one here. Okay, I have not seen you before. So I have to see how many there are still. It's you. Hello, Christian, by the way. Okay, yeah, go for it. But please, a quick one.
I'll make it quick.
Thank you.
A lot of what's been discussed here is in opposition to neoliberal green solutions. But given the recent global political trends that have democratically legitimized authoritarian national capitalism, how can we mobilize towards a socio-ecological transformation against such strong political headwinds, especially when these right-wing movements have gained power via existing democratic institutions?
Thank you, yeah. And the final one is Christian.
Perfect follow-up on the last question, actually. We have heard a lot of very sophisticated arguments and points, and unfortunately the political situation at the moment is one where none of those arguments will even come close. I mean, bullshitting is probably already a very high level of arguments to what we hear now mostly in the political domain, now that Trumpism has finally arrived also in Austria, before having been already for quite some time in Hungary. Vincent, we've discussed this issue. What does the panel predict in terms of these developments and its impacts to our sustainability endeavor here?
Christian, can you say which developments again? I didn't. The demographic? Anti-democratic, yeah, so it is close to the question before, yeah. And impacts. All right, I'll try to repeat the questions very shortly, and then you feel free to answer to whatever you want, and you all get the word, and then we'll have a final round. This means we will have about 15 minutes more. Is this okay to you? For you, whoever needs to leave, leaves. But I think it's worth doing this. Shall we use the word of change instead of growth? And how can we make sure that this change is kind of smooth and not too interruptive, so that important systems are still stable, such as the health system? Was the first one. The second, are we really seeing a shift to more renewables? Is it there? Then a question about ships, cruise ships with the liquid gas all over. How polluting are they? Then especially to Jutta and Uschi, but I think it's to everybody. Are there any measures that are good? Because we heard a lot of what is not good and what is greenwashing and is corruption. So is there anything happening that's really in favor of the transition we want? Then about degrowth and science, I was not sure if I understood rightly, but it's about if science should be the basis for communities within degrowth, if they should work together here. And then the last two questions, how can we mobilize a socio-ecological transition when on the other hand the right parties and populist parties are getting stronger and stronger, and also these voices in a society. Together with, we have anti-democratic developments now. What can we do against them? So this is my short summary. I know, of course, I did it in a very short way, but I hope I did it right. So feel free, whoever wants to start, starts. Vincent, and please, as short as possible. Thank you.
Yeah, just quickly on the energy question, it's a very quick answer that there is nothing, this is bullshit if you hear about it, which is called green transition in terms of energy. We are just adding always more and more and more energy, and the last International Energy Agency report is showing that there is a great increase in the development of renewable energy, but there is also an increase in fossil energy. So it's only adding and adding and adding and adding. There is no such thing as substitution and transition. I'd like to address the question about degrowth and academics. So it's a very difficult topic. I will be very brief and superficial, just invite you to a chapter of the next book I am dealing with Anitra Nelson and Clive Spash, and maybe some of you here in the room also contributed to the book, the Degrowth Handbook, which will be published in the spring at Routledge. We have a chapter with my colleagues of Cargonomia and also François Schneider, who was one of the pioneers of degrowth, who's also having a type of similar lives than me, part-time academics, part-time in the real world, and part-time in an alternative way of life, and so on, where we address this question. Just one example, with Cargonomia, we try to rethink university with a very small-scale project in Hungary, which is like an open university where we welcome students around between 10 and 20 every year, when we really reconnect practice and theoretical research. And I think it's something which has to be implemented. And I see when I teach degrowth in mainstream universities, like at Central European universities and so on, all my students are highly frustrated that we have to sit in rooms and we speak about beautiful ideas and how life could be much more interesting and so on, and we don't act at all. We don't have the opportunity to experiment. So I think it's really about how to reconnect practice and theory and practice and research in doing together around action research and so on. And there are a lot of great initiatives, not only Cargonomia or Can Decresh, made by François Schneider. There are great dynamics which are not enough around that. I wanted to address one more point quickly. I look at Ines. I will be very, very brief, considering that it's a very challenging question. So there were the question about how to stay positive.
This would be the final round. Keep it. You get the word one more.
Question, okay. So I will have the final question.
Yeah. Christina?
Can I continue?
Yeah, of course.
I will take up on a question on degrowth and science, but like broaden it to, as Vincent has been saying, like practitioners or practice in science. So we also did a book on climate social politics, you might know. It's in German, and there our aim was exactly also to bring together people who were working on the climate crisis, but then also on the social crisis in academia, but also outside of academia, being like academic researchers not working in academia in the more narrow sense, but in other public institutions, for example, or in NGOs. And based on that, we are currently running now a project in Linz, which is called Climate Social Linz. And that links, I'm picking aspects from the last rounds of question on the question of integration of knowledge and maybe also how to make sufficiency more attractive. What we try to do there is exactly discussing this idea that says we need to tackle the climate and the social crisis together and create with that, or try to create urban climate social utopias with marginalized people. In that case, we had workshops with single mothers, with activists, and with pupils, and used arts-based approaches, not saying that this is the only way we can go, but I know it's the last round, but that's also how we try to stay positive. Just also to point out what sustainable practices there are already existing in terms of mobility or I don't know, food or housing, not kind of blaming. And I know that like we have to reduce our material flows, but then there's also the question of who is the we now in, I don't know, Austria or in the global north. So so that's what we do there. And this is not the answer, but maybe also contributing to that question of not anti-democratic institutions, but like maybe talking also to people outside of our bubble, whom we're usually talking to in transdisciplinary processes, so really going to other communities and making their voices heard.
Thank you, Christina. Ursula, do you want to continue?
Yeah. Yeah, I have many thoughts in my mind with all these questions, and I wish I had all the answers for all the questions, because
maybe three important insights
would help a lot. But I think I remember myself that I like economy in general, because the basic idea of economy is to fulfill us with basic needs we have. And I think there are also good examples of companies or producers who are doing good when you think of food production, organic way of production, or having reuse stuff, not single use, long-lasting products. Also, as Greenpeace is saying, that we have airplanes is quite amazing, that we can fly to another area, but it's definitely not the idea to have a private jet to go to Mallorca and go shopping on the weekend. So to remember us that it's about also inequality and to find an economic system which is fair and which is equal. In general, I also think that it's all man-made, it's all invented by us, so we can change it. To also this other question, how to make it sexy to degrowth, I think, yes, of course, it's hard to change. It's hard to change system. I think there's even an own discipline here, change management. So it's really, really hard to change people and culture, but I think it's getting more and more that people think about it, that we have here a talk at a university where we talk about degrowth, which was definitely not possible maybe 10 years ago. So there is something going on. Yeah, and I also think that about this whole authoritarian system, the last two questions, yeah, I also don't really have the perfect answer, but I think we need to stay loud and we need to go on the streets. And for me personally, working in an NGO where I can work for something like that really helps, actually. So maybe there is also a shift in the next years after having all those all these right-wing governments, and also in Austria, whatever comes up here, that there is a movement that people buy independent media and invest in that. I think we take democracy or liberal democracy for granted for the last years, and now maybe there is a shift that it's not for granted and that we have to work on it every single day. So. Yeah, it's not the perfect answer, but that's my thought.
Yeah. Clive, maybe you want to answer to some of the questions, and Jutta, with you.
I'll make a few inputs. I did talk about democracy already. For one thing, it is not true that Trump was elected in a democratic system. America does not have a democracy. The other thing is, if you look at the election results, you'll find that in a presidential election year, the United States has its highest turnout, which is abysmal. Around 50%, 56% is a good year. So even if the majority of people who voted in that system voted for Trump, it would be like 25% of the population of America. So you've got like 75% of the people did not vote for Trump. So you should get that straight for a start. We need to get that very clear. The systems are failing us, right? We do not have democratic systems. They are a failure. Let's take Austria. Austria has 1 million people working here who are foreigners who do not get to vote, including me, right? So this is not democracy either. You know, the Americans might have got that right with the war against the English. No representation, no taxation without representation. I get taxed, but I don't have any representation in this country. So there are real problems in terms of the political system, but in terms of then broadening it out and saying, okay, so what do we do in the situations where the system, the national level government, has been taken over by extreme right wing? Well, what you do is you get active at all other levels. It's one level of governance in the system. And I can answer simultaneously the question about what is right about the system. Or what is right about the system is regulation and law is also very good. Local government, local activism, getting people actually to change the laws, to petition, to actually take local city government. Take Austria again. The division is between Vienna as a city and the rural and countryside. Okay, you look at the major division between the political and ideological positions there. And it's in the city, in Vienna, it's a stronghold of red-green politics, right? And it does very good things. So get active in the city, get active locally. This is the thing. I think you can't just focus on one level of governance. We have multi-levels of governance, and we have multiple mechanisms. And that would lead me to the science, right? So I'm a critical realist. And as a critical realist, I would look at mechanisms, think critically and think really. And that would actually also answer in terms of the question about growth, the growth conceptualization. As a scientist, a critical realist, I would want concepts which actually relate to what I'm studying. The thing is, as I pointed out with the kind of utopia, growth is not real, right? It's not even occurring, actually. So the concern about the European Union is that they don't have growth, right? That's why they want to reignite it, because they haven't got it right now. But even when you look at what goes on, much of what it is about is not about growth. It's about cost shifting, for example. Look at the economic model. The understanding of the economy is wrong. Mainstream economists do not understand the real economic system. Their approaches, their models, their ideas are bullshit, philosophically speaking.
Thank you, Clive. I'd like to open the final round, a quick one, and it's 2 questions for everybody, except Jutta, you get 3. Because there was still this question, what's going right at the moment? We got some answers, but what do you appreciate? Yes, this is maybe a political measure or activity that is good. Then the second question would be, what keeps you in a positive mood? But I guess we all are not always positive, but what keeps you in a positive? And then this was my question I'd like to add. I'm pretty sure Clive knows what to do in the next 10 or 20 years, but if you want to wish something where he should focus his work on, you can do so now, please. Jutta.
I think there's a lot already been said about very positive things going on, regionalization of food chains, reducing material flows. There's a lot of very interesting initiatives. There also is a growing resistance against extractivism and grabbing of land and corporate control over land. Perhaps we see that less because it's still much further away from us, but it is also happening here because corporate control over land, the concentration of land in the hands of a few, we're moving to kind of a new feudalism when it comes to land. And of course there is resistance to that. So I see a lot of positive and encouraging initiatives happening. They need to grow and we need to learn to fight for them. Perhaps I've grown up at the start of a generation that has had it very easy. And that has made us very complacent. And learning to live with uncertainty, learning that we have to question and to challenge if we want to go ahead. If the women 100 years and 150 years ago didn't challenge that they had no right to vote, that they had a husband who had to give them the right to do things, I wouldn't be sitting here today. So that is not such a long time. In my lifetime still, I would have had, if I'd been born before my lifetime, I would have had to ask permission of a male member of the family to sit here. You know, my lifetime is a time I can look back at. So change can happen, and that is what gives me a lot of hope. The way we move today is the way that others do not have to move. So I think that's a very, very strong motivating factor. Sure. And to also, in this learning to dispute again, to see who is gaining from the system that we have today. Inequality is growing, and we have to restart and relearn to ask the question, who is this policy benefiting? Who is this measure benefiting? Who is whatever is happening benefiting, and who pays the costs? We have become a little lazy to not ask that question because in our living reality, we have gained very well, we've lived very well by not asking questions of who benefits, because most of us have been on the benefiting side. And undoing that learning is what we have to learn, because the system is running up to planetary boundaries as well. So the suggestions to Clive for your next 10 years, I think exposing very much how those false, and I wouldn't say false, but fake solutions that are being put on the table, particularly from an economic perspective, that the equivalences are really made up and have no leg to stand on. And to really show much more clearly who is behind inventing equivalences where they don't exist. I think that for me is still hasn't seen enough traction.
Okay, thank you, Jutta. Uschi, what makes you going on? You said already, working for an NGO that is really strong and active and transparent. Maybe one more sentence, and also the question, what you suggest for Clive, but one sentence.
Yeah,
2 sentences.
I try to be short, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's basically it also, that working in that organization, I just realized it when I come back from Christmas break and we had this big news in Austria as you all know, and then coming into the office and seeing all those people very motivated, working on the good, that really motivates. And we also learned in our organization to celebrate successes. That's very important, to not only focus on the negative things, but also when we reach something which is positive, then we mention it, we celebrate it. And that keeps us strong, I would say, and that we are able to do something, actually. Hard to say. I also noted down exposing false solutions, but as a campaign organization, I learned how important it is to communicate and to be loud and to communicate easy. And so I hope that you will be loud and that you communicate, that you go also into media. We need more scientists who are loud, and to mix maybe this role of campaigning activism with scientists, to be scientifically, but communicate in a way people understand it, and then think about it. So that's my recommendation.
Thank you, Ushi. Christina.
Yeah, how to stay positive? That's a question Silvia Federici got. We had the chance to host her online in fall at BOKU as part of the Beigewum Feminist Academy, like Feminist Economics Academy we could host there. Cool. And she was saying, well, I have to go on because otherwise I would jump out of the window. That's not my answer. But I would second what you were saying. I think it's like really important to celebrate also like the small successes. And also I would add to have good cooperation partners. And I think it's a success that we're all here and have this good kind of panel. And actually what I brought, because you didn't give us that question, just to make it now open, that we had also some preparation panel with Ines. One question was not only what we were thinking Clive should focus on, but also what we would like to give to Clive. And since I'm working on food, I appreciate food very much, and I appreciate celebration. So, Clive, I brought you a piece of cake because I think it's really important.
Thank you.
That you and we also, sorry, not enough cake for everybody in the room, but keep on celebrating, and also celebrating what you've been done in teaching and research, not only but also here at WU, also, and although I never studied or worked here, but just as a cooperation partner. And I would say just keep on doing what you've been doing. You could work more on alternatives if you want to, but otherwise it's really also important to have the very critical voice in academia.
Thank you, Christina.
Thank you.
Vincent.
So a few points about how to stay positive. I always been in the degrowth movement strongly criticized for being too much positive sometimes, and I am less and less positive. Maybe like you, I'm getting old, Clive, and I'm getting old. You can only see what you've been announcing. I mean, the catastrophes you've been announcing, alerts about upcoming catastrophes, and you see them happening one after the other one. So it's difficult to stay positive in that, but still, I think there are a lot of good reasons to stay positive. It's going to address also one more point from the audience, how to make degrowth more attractive. I really believe that it's already very, very, very attractive. The majority of people would love to live in another world based on degrowth principles. All the surveys are showing it. If you take time to go to talk to anybody, even with Trump voters, even if it's a minority in the United States. If you take time to go to talk to Orban supporters in Hungary and so on, but out of the stupid debates you may have on mainstream media or social networks and so on, and you really sit with a person and go into an intimate conversation, you will see that the majority is here, willing, ready to move out of the box. Where are the blockades? I think we are highly disempowered. First, in our own brain, we all believe that we are isolated, that we cannot. So the first step is start to understand that we are not isolated. There are much more people than what we think we are ready to move. And I would say that what makes me still positive and so on, it's the opportunity to live with a great community in Budapest, around Budapest, and in my daily life to have some spaces when I can have a breath out of this very dystopic, depressing world and so on. So to stay positive, I would say disconnect as much as possible, so cut the social network and so on, and reconnect. Reconnect with your people, reconnect with the territories and so on. And one last point is that this, I quote Mark Twain, with hammer in your head, seeing all the problem looking like nails. I think it's really degrowth is also about to make visible what is made invisible by the dominant system. There are a lot of great things based on the degrowth principles, which are daily happening all around our lives and so on, and to focus on what is already beautiful here and to build on that step by step. So stay positive. And for Clive, I think it's too early for me to give you any recommendation or whatsoever. I need a few drinks. It's too much for that.
Okay. Clive, before I give you the final word, I would like to, from my side, to say thank you to all of you for staying half an hour longer. Usually, who knows me, when I'm doing moderation, I'm very strict on time, but I got a yes from our event organization team and from you that we make a bit longer, and thanks for this great attention. Thanks for the questions, although not all have been answered, but I hope some have been answered to a satisfying degree. Thank you to all of you, to the 4 of you, especially those that came from quite far away, but also, of course, to all of you, and Clive for initiating this, for asking me to be the moderator. It was really very inspiring for me. And what motivates you to go on, Clive?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, isn't it? So, I mean, when I started out, just anecdotally, there were very few people who were economists and paid any attention to the environment at all. When I did my undergraduate thesis, they actually held a departmental committee meeting to decide whether the thesis should count as economics, because I was actually studying pollution. I was studying sulfur and sulfur dioxide and acid rain at the time, you know, and they were like, well, it's not inflation, it's not unemployment, what is this? Pollution? I don't know. Luckily, they agreed to actually to evaluate it as an economics thesis. So things have changed a lot, right? Now, it's not strange to say that the economy and the environment are connected. People understand this, and it's not strange to study it. But of course, after, you know, getting 30, 40 years and things don't get better, you could get very depressed about it, right? But at the same time, we can say there is a lot of change going on. There have been legislations. When I go to conservation movements, they say the conservation movement has to move into the economics and change its language because it was a failure. It was not a failure. This is a lie, right? And that is because it actually succeeded in getting legislation. It succeeded in getting environmental protection agencies set up. It succeeded in getting land areas designated. It succeeded across the board. It succeeded so much that it became a threat to the corporations and to the power elites. And they have spent 30 years countering what was achieved in the 1960s and 1970s. They have infiltrated environmental organizations. They have infiltrated the governments. What does that mean? Should we be depressed about it? No, it means there are successful mechanisms by which they can be attacked, controlled, prevented from doing what they do, and they know it, and they're susceptible. So what keeps me going is that I get angry. Right? Mm-hmm. And then you have to think, getting angry, well, that's not regarded as a good thing, but then you have to redirect your anger and redirect it in ways that can be seen as positive and helpful and do good things. Inspire your students, right? So the SEEP Masters Program has been a great inspiration for me. I came here for 5 years, and here I am almost 15 years later. I should have gone a long time ago. There's also the activist community. I like the activists, right? I mean, I connect science to activism, and I've written in my book about this, you know, how it is a totally legitimate thing that we have value positions, we should act on our science, we have to do this. And activist communities have much more solidarity than do academic communities. So that's also very inspiring, but this also means that you should connect to those communities. And I would agree with Vincent, don't immerse yourself in the horrors of the world, right? What you have to do is, I don't look at all the media all the time. I don't do social media very much or any of these kinds of things. Stay focused. Take on what you can achieve. Look at what you can achieve. Take action. Find friends. Get solidarity. And here we are, together. Thank you.
Let's go for a drink. and
Thank you very much. And now we all need a drink.
Yes.
Please join us.